Welcome to Police Academy Prep. This is Deputy Z, and today we will be going through the Law Enforcement Basic Recruit Book of the Police Academy, starting off in Chapter 1, Introduction to Law Enforcement. This will be the short edition recorded version, where I breeze through the bold and highlighted points and terms in the chapter to provide a more streamlined, full recap of the chapter. The short version is great for situations like short drives to the Academy on exam days. But be sure to watch the in-depth recording version where I read from the entire chapter and provide insight to potential test questions and real-life situations, as that version will be the one that fully prepares you for the test. So let's go ahead and jump into the material. Law enforcement is a service-oriented profession. That will be a test question. An officer's customer is the public. Also a potential test question there as well. Each day, law enforcement officers focus on helping people in the community they serve, maintaining civil order and enforcing laws. Now, determining your roles. We have 3 roles: the supporter, the stabilizer, and the enforcer. The role of the supporter is the role you should automatically adopt when interacting with your community. Examples would be people who are hurt and grieving, experiencing a personal tragedy. For example, a lost child, helping a confused person with Alzheimer's, or interviewing someone that has gone through severe trauma. Next will be the stabilizer. Stabilizer is generally used during critical incidents where you'll need to display confidence and calm those around you. Examples of situations that might require you to assume the stabilizer role include disaster recovery and responding to the scene of a traffic crash. Then we have the enforcer. The role of the enforcer represents duties that are typically associated with a law enforcement officer, such as making arrests and maintaining order by giving lawful commands when deemed necessary. A couple examples would be when you have to be assertive and give orders rather than ask questions. But do note, the majority of your time will be spent as the supporter and the stabilizer. Make sure you understand shifting roles and moving between different roles being an important skill to be an effective law enforcement officer. So know how you need to shift between the enforcer to the stabilizer to the supporter and back through that. Know the definition of emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, someone who has emotional intelligence has the ability to identify and cope with their emotions while also doing the same for the people around them. Improving your emotional intelligence can help you determine when to assume certain roles. Emotional intelligence is a skill that can make you a better officer, and it can also enhance your officer's safety by keeping your emotions in check. Okay, let's move on here to the Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission, also known as the CJSTC. Again, that is the Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission. It was established with the mission to ensure that qualified, competent, and ethical criminal justice officers serve the residents and visitors of Florida. In pursuit of these goals, the CJSTC is committed to delivering quality standards and training, as well as increasing the professionalism of officers throughout the state. Know this next paragraph here. The CJSTC is responsible for overseeing the certification, employment, training, maintenance of officer records, and overall conduct of all criminal justice officers in Florida. The Florida statutes appoint the CJP, the Criminal Justice Professionalism Division, within the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE, to support and assist the work of the CJSTC. Know your training requirements. You have to pass each test with 80% or higher. Proficiency in DUI, proficiency in high liability, and the physical fitness program. Make sure you know what the SOCI is, the State Officer Certification Exam. Know that you have to pass it within 3 attempts, and you can find information about the SOCI on the FDLE website. You can also find more information on the state exam SOCI video that I put out as well. Make sure you know the requirements for officer certification. You have to meet all the minimum requirements and standards, complete the approved basic recruit training, pass the SOCI, and be actively employed with a law enforcement agency in a full-time, part-time, or auxiliary sworn officer position. Do know that you have 4 years from the starting date of your basic recruit training to complete the certification process, not from when you pass the SOCI. Just remember that the day you start the academy, you have 4 years from that day. So if you start off on July 1st of this year, then you have 4 years ending on June 30th, the day before July 4th, 4 years from now. Make sure you know, I'm not going to go through this list because it is quite long here, but know ways that you can be denied certification. So know what nolo contendere is when a person does not accept or deny responsibility, but they do accept punishment in a court of law. And then let's move to, obviously, know your reprimands that could happen for violating those above things, such as written reprimand, probation, suspension, and revocation. Know that a law enforcement officer is one small piece of a large and complex structure known as the criminal justice system. Know that there are 3 parts of the criminal justice system: law enforcement, the court system, and corrections. Okay, know that the criminal justice definition. It involves the maintenance and enforcement of criminal laws and includes the structures, functions, and decision-making processes of the agencies that deal with the management and control of crime and criminal offenders. Okay, then you have your law enforcement agencies. You have your local or municipal, such as your police departments. Then your county law enforcement, such as your sheriff's office. And then your state law enforcement agencies, such as the Florida Highway Patrol and the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And your federal law enforcement agencies, such as the FBI and Immigration and Customs, ICE. When it comes to corrections, know the 4 types of components in the correction system. You have county jails, which is 365 days or less, which is 1 year or less. You have your juvenile assessment and detention centers for juveniles, which are younger than 18. Your prisons, which people go to for longer than a year. And you have probation and parole. Probation is a sentencing placing a person under the supervision of a probation officer for a specified length of time instead of confinement. So remember, probation is they don't go to jail or prison, they get probation. And then know that parole is the release of an inmate from a correctional institute before their court-imposed sentence ends. So parole, they get released early. So parole is they went through prison, but they get released early. And probation is they have probation instead of going to jail or prison. Know the flow chart for levels of criminal involvement. You have point of interest being first. Then you determine whether they are a witness, a subject, or a victim. And then the subject could then become your suspect or detainee, which means they've been taken into custody. They're not free to leave, and they're generally a suspect. Then you have your arrestee. The person goes from subject to arrestee when they are arrested for a crime. And then your defendant, which is a person becomes a defendant once they are formally charged with a crime in a court proceeding. And then offender. A person is an offender once they are convicted of a crime by the courts. So I'll quickly go through these bolded definitions here. Your complainant is your caller. It's the one who reports the crime or alleges a crime has been committed. Your witness, any person who has information about some element of the crime. A victim, a person or entity that suffers an injury as a result of a crime, whether it be physical, loss of money, loss of property, or damage to property. Remember that not all crimes have an individual victim. There could be multiple. And know that the state can also be the victim. A confidential source, a person who provides information in confidence about a crime, whether civic duty or expectation of personal benefit or advantage. Person of interest, someone involved in a criminal investigation who has not been arrested or formally accused of a crime. So it's just someone that the police want to talk to. Then you have your subject, a known person accused or suspected of committing a crime. A subject may not actually have committed the crime. Then you have your suspect or detainee, someone you believe has committed the crime. Your arrestee, a person who's under arrest or has been arrested. Your defendant, a person formally accused of committing a crime. And then an offender, a person convicted of a crime in a court of law. Then we have your chain of command. Chain of command is the order of authority within an organization. Do briefly know your levels of hierarchy here, where your sheriff or chief of police are being at the top, your deputy or officer at the bottom, and then the people that go through in the middle. So definitely know the top, definitely know the bottom, and understand vertical communication and lateral communication. So chain of command enhances an agency's efficiency through coordinating communication channels and reducing confusion. So vertical communication is up and down. So that would be from the sergeant to the officer, or the captain to the lieutenant, etc. Your lateral communication is across, so same level in the chain of command. So police officer to police officer, sergeant to sergeant, captain to captain, etc. Make sure all officers should operate within the chain of command and keep their immediate supervisor informed of their activities. Delegation of authority. When a person with authority grants decision-making person to another person, it is called the delegation of authority. Procedural justice. This is an approach that focuses on carrying out justice in a fair and equitable manner. You have 4 pillars of procedural justice. Okay, before I get into that, actually, I'm going to read this here. Employing procedural justice in your duties as a law enforcement officer can make you more effective in your work. People are also more likely to comply and it be a more positive view of law enforcement. So back to the 4 pillars of procedural justice, you have fairness and consistency of rule application. Just remember the definition of that is the perception of fairness. So if you see fairness, then you know it's fairness and consistency of rule of application. Voice and representation in the process. This involves groups and the decisions that affect them and listening to their concerns. Transparency and openness of the process. Decisions are made without secrets and deception. And impartiality and unbiased decision making. Decisions are based on relevance and data. To practice procedural justice in your daily police work, it helps to remember the LEAD framework, LEED framework. That stands for listen, give everyone you interact with a chance to tell you their side of the story. Explain, always explain your actions. Equity, make fair decisions. And dignity, treat people with respect. All right. Practicing procedural justice minimizes tension and potential violence in law enforcement encounters with the public. Okay. Make sure you know the 3 main roles discussed early in this chapter: supporter, stabilizer, and enforcer all employ procedural justice. A key component of procedural justice is the concept of police legitimacy. Police legitimacy happens when the community views law enforcement as fair, morally obligated to administer the law, and as a legitimate authority of power. So it's basically the public's perception of us. Just know that when the public does not have confidence in law enforcement, there may be negative consequences. For example, not trusting us, not reporting crimes, or taking matters into their own hands. Now we'll move on to ethics here. Ethics are the standards of conduct based on the principles of right and wrong defined by society. So again, ethics are defined by society. And ethics dictate how a person should behave, and know that laws and rules are derived from ethics. Okay, make sure you understand the duty to intervene if you see another officer committing an offense, treating a community member with disrespect, or engaging in any behavior that would be deemed unethical. Make sure you know that on and off duty, you should also make ethical decisions. Know the law enforcement code of ethics, also referred to the Oath of Honor. The Oath of Honor is a shortened version of the code of ethics. I do not believe you don't need to memorize these for the exam from what I recall, but you do need to know that the Code of Ethics does provide specific principles for law enforcement officers to follow, and the Oath of Honor is the shorter version of those ethics. Okay, then we move to unethical behavior. So bribery occurs when you accept something for your benefit that influences your professional conduct or decision making. Perjury is the offense of lying in court after taking an oath. Okay. No misuse of your position. Never misuse the authority entrusted to you as a law enforcement officer. The Florida statutes prohibit misuse of your position as a public employee. So some examples could be having a family member's traffic ticket dismissed, using your badge to gain unauthorized entry to a concert, or wearing uniform for the sole purpose of obtaining a discount at a local restaurant. Make sure you understand confidential information. You don't talk to other deputies or police officers unless they're involved in it. Don't share photos or anything like that to family members or friends. Know your conflict of interest. Okay, in official law enforcement matters, you must not influence the actions of other people with whom you have significant personal, business, or employment relationships, as this creates a conflict of interest. A conflict of interest is a situation on or off duty in which an officer is in a position to personally benefit from actions or decisions made in their official capacity. So, for example, you cannot arrest someone and then recommend your family friend who is an attorney to represent the arrestee. And do not engage in conflicts of interest off duty either. Gratuity. Gratuity is anything of value intended to benefit the giver more than the receiver. Do not take something given to you because of your position of authority. You always ask yourself 3 questions when it comes to gratuity. Does this person want something from me? Would it be offered this if I were not a law enforcement officer? And what is expected in return? Then we move into sexual misconduct. Sexual misconduct can include anything from asking a driver for a date when conducting a traffic stop to having sex on duty. Know harassment in the workplace, and know what a hostile work environment is. That is a workplace that is difficult or uncomfortable to work in because of an harasser's behavior. For example, explicit photographs and posters in a break room, other employees not wanting to use that because of that. Understand what quid pro quo is. That is something for something, and understand that that falls under harassment. Sexual harassment is unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature. Know that sexual harassment is a form of discrimination. Be careful with consequences of sexual harassment. You could be suspended, loss of rank, retraining, or the CJSTC could revoke your certification altogether. Unbiased policing. Bias is the unfair treatment and attitude towards a group of people, and it is considered unethical behavior. Unbiased policing, also known as fair and impartial policing, is the equal treatment of any person you stop, question, search, detain, or arrest, regardless of the person's race, ethnicity, religion, gender, presentation, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, national origin, homeless status, mental or physical disability, age, or other self-defining characteristic. Make sure with unbiased policing you make decisions based on evidence and data rather than emotions and predetermined ideas of a person. Bias can present itself in different ways. Someone with explicit bias is aware of their dislike and are openly hateful and biased about it. So remember, explicit, think of an explicit song. It is openly hateful, right? In contrast, implicit bias is a bias or prejudice that is present but not consciously held or recognized. So it basically means you have a bias in your brain, you just have never sat down and realized you had that bias. Okay. Next, we move into discriminatory practices. You have 3 of them: stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination. Stereotype is the idea people with blue eyes are bad people. The prejudice is the feeling I don't like people with blue eyes. And discrimination is the action you take. I don't want to be friends with anyone who has blue eyes. So the definitions here: stereotyping is judging a group of people who are different from you based on your own or others' opinions or encounters. Remember that positive and negative stereotypes can hurt people. Prejudice is an unjustified and baseless attitude towards a person because of their membership in a social group. And then these prejudice may grow from learned behavior and attitudes to discrimination. Discrimination occurs when people choose to act on their prejudices. Okay, discriminatory or bias-based policing is the unequal treatment of any person, including stopping, questioning, searching, detaining, or arresting a person solely or primarily because of the person's race, ethnicity, religion, gender, and all those other things that I mentioned earlier. Okay, now we move into officer well-being and stress. Stress includes the physical or emotional reactions to an event or situation. Stress may come from a perceived or real threat, and it can also be a physical or mental response to a demanding situation or change. Negative stress can slow reaction time, make you question your decisions, or cloud your judgment. But not all stress is negative. Stress can make you aware of a potentially dangerous situation and prepare you to react, such as in the case of fight, flight, and freeze response. So know what fight, flight, and freeze are. Fight is where the body prepares to face the danger head on. Flight, the body prepares to get away from a dangerous situation. And freeze, the body fails to react. Then we have our categories of stress. There are 3 of them: routine stress, acute stress, and traumatic stress. Routine stress happens on a daily basis and is a normal part of life. Make sure you know the examples: balancing home and work, and taking care of day-to-day tasks. Acute stress is short-lived and occurs when you experience unexpected changes in your life, such as the end of a relationship, the death of a family member, or sudden unemployment. Traumatic stress occurs during major events like war, disasters, incidents of assault, or other events when you feel your personal safety or the safety of others is in danger. A lot of people have confusion here with the death of a family member. A lot of people think that is traumatic, but I know for our test that was acute stress, and they upheld that one as being correct. So just don't confuse death of a family member with traumatic. Death of a family member is acute stress. Now back to traumatic stress. Some people might be at risk for developing PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. So let's get into PTSD here. PTSD is a severe anxiety disorder that develops after experiencing an extremely stressful event such as war, physical violence, or a natural disaster. It can also develop over time due to repeated exposure to stress. Sometimes the sufferer is not the person threatened by the situation, but someone who has witnessed it. Make sure you know the symptom of PTSD, which is hypervigilance. This is a sense of always being on guard that can make it difficult to disengage from a stressful situation. Okay, make sure you know your symptoms of PTSD: aggressive behavior, reckless or self-destructive behavior, problems with concentration, and difficulties falling asleep. Also, depression, anxiety, flashbacks, and reoccurring nightmares. Make sure you know that traumatic stress has medical consequences. Let's see if there are any here. High levels of stress hormones have been linked to illness, anxiety, and increased risk of drug and alcohol addiction. Traumatic stress is a normal part of your job. Feeling stressed by traumatic situations is not a failure on your part. It is your body's biological response to trauma. Understanding this will help you realize that when you're impacted by traumatic stress, it's a good idea to reach out to a professional for help. Acute and routine stress may not initially appear to be as dangerous as traumatic stress, but both can have negative effects on your life if not managed properly. So know the symptoms of routine and acute stress: anxiety, tension, irritability, and headaches, blood pressure changes, and loss of sleep. Long-term stress responses can also include depression or suicidal thoughts. Then we move to how to reduce stress. So just know, avoiding alcohol, good diet, sleep, exercise. Make sure you know resilience. That is the capacity to effectively cope with stress, trauma, and other serious problems. And how you do that is by making your mental and physical health a priority. That is how you build resilience. You can also strengthen resilience by making your health a priority and seeking help from mental health professionals. Be aware that there are resources for both the public and specifically for law enforcement officers. Make sure you understand what secondary trauma is, also known as vicarious trauma, and this occurs when a person is exposed to the trauma of others and develops physical or mental impacts. And then compassion fatigue is the emotional exhaustion that comes from helping others on a long-term basis. Know what stigma is? It is a set of negative and unfair beliefs that a society or group of people have about something. Okay, and law enforcement officers may not seek help because they fear that doing so will negatively impact their careers. But realize that speaking to a licensed mental health professional is strictly confidential. Focusing on building your professional resilience and taking care of yourself can help you cope with secondary trauma and compassion fatigue. Make sure to reach out for help. And that concludes Chapter 1 of the Basic Recruit Book, Introduction to Law Enforcement, Short Edition. Like I said at the beginning, make sure to listen to the full-length, in-depth edition, as that covers more of the chapter in detail, and that will be paramount to passing the test. Like I said, this short edition is more for on the way to work, on the way to your exam. You got 20-30 minutes to crunch, but you want that full recap of all the important topics. That's what this video provides. So go ahead and if you get a chance, listen to the extended version and stay tuned for more videos. Good luck on your test. Deputy Z, tuning out.